Welcome to the Creative Cows DSLR Essentials podcast. I'm Robbie Carmen.
And I'm Rich Harrington.
You know, Rich, you start using these cameras and you're out there shooting and suddenly you realize the image could be a little better, right? And there's a lot of ways of doing this. And today on this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about using filters, right? Both the screw-on type, and then we're also going to jump over to talk about using a matte box and using filtration through a matte box as well.
Yeah, and I find that filters are most often coming in handy when I'm shooting in conditions with a lot of light.
Yep.
It's not just, bright sunny days. There are other conditions, reflected light or haze.
Of course.
But, a filter is an essential investment into your lenses. And I think, they come in lots of different shapes, lots of different purposes.
Right, yeah.
I think the easiest one, though, is going to just be that simple UV filter.
Yeah, photographers out there are probably very comfortable with these, right? A UV filter obviously cuts down on haze in the image, but also has the added benefit of sort of protecting the front element of a lens,
Yeah.
And there are some debate. Obviously, there's some purists out there. We know a few of them who will always tell you never put another piece of unnecessary glass in front of your lens. My feeling about them is that, because they're so cheap, that add a little bit of protection. They don't generally, if you buy a high quality one, are not really going to do anything to the image. Cut down on haze, they're a good choice, and these are just a screw-on type.
And you don't have to shoot with them on, but I actually travel with them on because, I've been through TSA and, I've had the lens cap on in my padded bag. This very lens, take it out, I pop my lens cap off, and the glass is falling off. I was like, immediate heart attack because this ain't a cheap lens.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, wait, good, that's just the UV filter. Like, that was the first line of defense. That's what took the vibration and cracked, and the lens itself was fine.
Absolutely. So, the haze filters are good. A lot of people just leave them on the camera, but as you start doing more work, there's other types of filters that you might want to use. And just to be clear, right now we're talking about lens filters that screw on to the actual threads of a lens if you're using a photo style lens, right?
And the thing that's important there is you have to match, you can't just buy one set. They match your specific lens. So obviously, this lens has a different diameter than this lens, and they'd each have their own filter.
Right, absolutely. And so, after the haze filters, the next step that people usually take, and it's become a big concern when shooting video, right, is the ND filter, right?
So neutral density.
Neutral density filter. So, you're out there and you're exposing your image. Of course, everybody loves their bokeh porn, so they have their lens set wide open. They're shooting a bright sunny day, and all of a sudden everything is super overexposed because they're letting a tremendous amount of light into the camera.
Obviously, you could back the ISO off, but at some point you're going to, and there are actually negative ISOs in some cases. You can go to low mode on the camera, but, not a negative number, but it just backs it down below 100. And, okay, it's still too bright, especially with those full frame sensors. You're going to have to put neutral density on.
Right, as I said, especially because everybody likes to shoot wide open. So a neutral density filter, depending on the level of neutral density that it applies, you can have different amounts that cut the light back in progressive steps, right? So you can get one that, is 2 or 3 stops, another one that's a half a stop or 1 stop. And those, again, are found most often, in just a screw-on type. So here's the rub. You're going to be in situations where you're going to be wanting to, maybe adjust how much neutral density that you're applying to a particular shot, right? So let's say you're
just reaching really quick and screwing another filter.
Right, I got really good at that. I can unscrew them and screw them really fast, right? And so that's where this idea of variable ND filters come in, right? They're kind of like a polarizer, if you ever used a polarizer, in the sense that they rotate around the front of the lens so you can get a varying level of the ND effect, right?
Well, you actually bring up a good point there, too. Another filter type is that polarizer. So if you're shooting through glass, like maybe car windshields or, through the front window of a restaurant to someone sitting on their side, pick up a polarizer. But you're absolutely right. The front of that filter is just going to turn and give you a variable amount. Of course, these types of filters are more expensive than a screw-on filter.
Sure, but I found, companies like Stingray and other ones out there that do make variable NDs. It's almost, to me, it's becoming a little bit of a necessary tool because, one of those things where I'm walking from inside to outside, or I'm doing, various setups where I need to be able to very quickly adjust. Think of it almost as like an aperture control on the end of the lens, right? Instead of having to click through something real quick, you can very easily, like if you have a traditional cinema style lens or an older lens that had an aperture control on it, it's almost not the same, of course, but you can almost get the same effect by reducing the amount of light that's coming into the camera using a variable ND filter. So
because you couldn't really like jump into the menus and change the ISO in the middle of the shot.
Or on most modern cameras, that's going to be a click. You don't want that. So used well, variable ND filters can be definitely a lifesaver, right?
Yeah, and before And on top of the filters,
Yeah.
you know, you want to make sure you're not going to get reflections or lens flares.
Yep.
And, you know, these filters can sort of amplify that problem because it's
Sure.
extra glass.
Right.
You know, a lot of people forget that, you know, these plastic rings are there for a reason.
Yeah, and they're so ridiculously expensive sometimes. But yes, you're right. You know, every lens, you know, if you're using a photo lens, but you know, if you're not using a photo lens, you can you know, still find them out there. But these little hoods are there for a reason, right? They're going to protect the front of the lens from lens flares and stuff like that. So you're going to be able to get a little more control over. So when you're doing different filtration and stuff like that, you can do that. Now, one more point about the
And some of them will have like a slip-up lens hood
totally.
too. Yeah.
And one more point about the different lens filters. You mentioned diameter. The other thing to understand is that some lenses, just the way that they're constructed, like I have a fisheye lens, right? Where the way that the fisheye is constructed, it kind of bulges out of the front. I can't put a screw-on type filter onto that lens, right?
Yeah, I mean, this particular one, you know, is a wide-angle lens, and while it does bulge, the ring is further in front, so there is room for that.
Right.
But you got to be careful, and I think, you know, like many pieces of gear, you don't want to have a great lens and then buy a cheap filter.
Oh, absolutely not.
Because the quality of the glass, you know, it's like, I've got great glass, and now I'm going to put plastic wrap on the front of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, yes, you can find filters for, you know, $20 on Amazon or something like that. But, you know, like other things when it comes to professional work, I tend to not want to, you know, go cheap on these, right? I mean, these are things that directly contribute to the visual quality of your image. You know, so buying a nice set of filters from respected companies like B&W or Tiffin or something like that is definitely going to be the way to go.
And you can get a case to carry your filters in the field so you can change as you go.
Now, you mentioned hoods, right? And we've talked about filters. There's another device, obviously, that sort of throws this all into one kind of appliance, if you will, and that would be the matte box.
And a lot of folks buy the matte box because it sort of completes the look.
It's a cool look.
But that's not what it's there for.
Right.
You know, there really is a functional purpose here. And let's sort of break it down from the French flag on back.
Sure. So various matte boxes, the first thing you're going to find about them is that they tend to be pretty expensive, right? That's the one thing you're going to notice. You think, oh, just a couple pieces of metal and a couple pieces of plastic, what's the big deal? Well, they're specialty items, right? If, you know, the film world and professional users have been using them for years, and so they're kind of a niche item, but they do a lot of things. So starting at the front here, we obviously just have a frame. French flag, it's a single French flag on this one. You can find matte boxes that will have, you know, bottom and top French flag, left and right to mark off the whole thing. And basically what the French flag allows you to do is to control flare and lens coming in, light coming in from either side or top and bottom of the lens.
And be careful if you are doing a zoom with that lens. Not that these lenses are that good for zooming, but
Sure.
if you change the zoom on the lens, you can go from not seeing the French flag to having the French flag clipping the top of your
Oh,
shot.
I tell you, that's so annoying when you get the top of the French flag, or if you're going over something bouncy and it kind of bounces into the shot. It can be annoying. Then going back onto the back part of the behind the French flag here, this is where we have a filter stage, right? I'll just pop this guy out. This particular matte box is uses 4x4 lens filters, right?
Yeah, and it's got actually 2 stages, so you can load up 2 filters if you need it.
Right, and so this is a 4x4 lens filter. This particular one's made by Tiffin, and they all different styles, just like the screw-on one. So you can find ND filters, you can find polarizers. This particular one I have is a warming filter.
Right.
You can find Pro Mist, all sorts of things.
And, you know, to put things in perspective, you know, here's an ND filter, and, you know, this is definitely going to knock things down. You know, this is a 0.3.
Right.
So this is definitely going to take that down. If you see that hold up, it's significantly darker, and obviously that's going to knock down the light.
Right, so all you do is literally put the 4x4 filter, screw it into the little holder here.
Tight enough that it doesn't fall out, not so tight that you crack it.
Right, and then we simply just slide it back in, if I can do that. There we go. Slide it back in, and then you'll notice that there's a little bit of some adjustment screws down here. I'll just screw this in to tighten it up a little bit. There we go. So you'll notice on this one, I actually put it into the rotating stage. For this particular warming filter, probably not needed for the rotating stage, but depending on the type of filter that you're actually putting in, you might need to rotate it like in the case of a polarizer or something like that.
Yeah.
And then coming a little further back, this particular part right here is called a donut. Donuts come in a lot of different styles, right? You might have just sort of an elastic one like this. You might find them in sort of like foam that can sort of fit around the lens. And the purpose of the donut is to eliminate light coming back into the filter, coming from this way, right? So you're not going to get light shooting in through the camera.
And that's what I like about this one. This particular one is a Genesis, and you can actually, you see there, like it expands quite a bit. I'm getting a whole finger in there, and that allows you to switch the size of the lenses. And the whole idea here is that if you were shooting and you were going to change,
just slide it right out of the donut. Yep.
Take that off, and if we were going to change camera body or lenses, obviously we couldn't put this Nikon lens on that Canon, not very easily, but a larger lens would fit right in there and it would wrap around, and then you see we have bars here so you can adjust the position of the matte box. So as you switch length of lenses, a good one here is going to have rails that you could adjust and pull this forward or back. So you see we have all this extra rail here,
right,
giving us more throw so we could pull that forward or back.
One of the other things I was going to mention too, and this particular matte box doesn't have it, but some matte boxes, particularly the more pricey ones, will actually have a swing out feature, right? Where you can actually, when you need to do a lens change like that, instead of having to dismount everything like we kind of did here, you can literally swing open the matte box itself and then replace your lens, replace the donut size if you need to, and go from there.
Yeah, so very good tools are going to give you control over how light is coming into the camera. The basic there, this is more of a cinema style shoot, but even if you're out there running and gunning, invest in some good screw-on filters, especially ND for outdoor shooting, but even just the clear UV haze filters for protection.
Yep, absolutely.
Don't stack your filters. So if you have a haze filter on, you need ND, take the haze off before you put the ND on.
Sure.
So you don't want to really start stacking these up. And typically, while there are some special effects ones like Pro Mist,
yep,
I tend to prefer to do that stuff in post rather than while shooting.
Yeah, and again, this is like many things that we've talked about over the course of this series. A lot of these things are subjective. You know what I'm saying? My personal feeling is much in line with yours. Something like a warming filter, I'm a little iffy about it because I'd like to maybe do that in post where I have a little more control when I'm doing color correction.
But I know you have the Star Twinkle filter.
I do have the Star Twinkle filter, But so there's a lot of things.
They do make that, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. But some of the basic filters would be the haze filters, the ND filters, the polarizers, those kind of things. And yeah, lots of options. If you don't want to move up to a big matte box, right? Screw-on filters will work fine. If you're ready to step up to a matte box, a little bit more control over filtration stages as well as controlling flare and stuff like that. And as you pointed out, to complete the look of your kit, these can be a great option.
Well, these actually can save you money though, because if you're on a shoot and you've got 7 different lenses,
yep,
and in typical fashion, all of these lenses seem to have different diameters.
Yep.
7 lenses times a UV times times different size ND. Well, all of a sudden you could be spending quite a bit more. So, if you've got 2-3 lenses, screw-on filters seem to be the right match. If you're doing a cinema style shoot or a more commercial shoot, and you're going to be swapping out lenses or you're renting lenses, then I'd go with a matte box.
Right, and and just like anything else, especially when we talk about glass and sort of the idea of good glass is forever, if you buy a high quality set, especially when you step into the matte box size filters, the 4x4 filters, if you buy a nice high quality set of 4x4 filters, they can last you a whole hell of a long time because the 4x4 filters are just a sort of a standard size.
Until your production assistant drops one.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Cool.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining us. My name's Rich Harrington.
And I'm Robbie Carmen.
Be sure to head on over to creativecow.net where you can check out the DSLR forum, as well as be sure to subscribe to our podcast. It's available as both HD and SD over at iTunes, or you can watch it on creativecow.net. Thanks for joining us.